come once again to discuss things.
Hi everyone, welcome to this episode of Geeky Gentlemen. This is our final episode here in Horror Month.
Oh, I think it's been ever. I was like, oh really? You're quitting the show?
Yep, it's done. This is the high point.
Wow, I'm honored.
And as you can see,
kidding, everybody, there will be more shows.
Yeah, and as you can see, the one, the only Captain Logan has joined us, and I am Sid Partu, and also here is Steve Baxter.
Hello.
Steve's just so, like, whatever. Yeah. It doesn't matter. Ian made fun of my superpower now.
He doesn't care. It's the last show.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's the last show. That's it. We've hit our peak. We hit our peak a long time ago, and now it's all just downhill anyway, so whatever.
What'd you think of Misery? Whatever.
Whatever. I thought it was a weird pick for the last show you'll ever do, but...
There's something a meta statement about Ian's time making the show.
Alright. So anyway, so here we are for the last episode of Horror Month, and I thought it'd be fun to have Captain Logan on to talk about it, because I know he's not a big horror guy, so I'd be interested to see what kind of horror movie he would pick, and just to get his thoughts on it, so I figured I'd probe your brain for why you picked this movie real quick before we get into it.
Oh, sure. Well, so growing up, I was not a big horror person, but it might surprise you to know that my mother was. And I easily could have become a big horror person had I don't know, just watched more horror movies with my mom, because she always loved the horror, and she's a huge Stephen King fan. So this is one of the few horror movies that I sort of grew up with, I guess at least like junior high, in high school. And I read Firestarter when I was in high school before I saw the movie, and was really disappointed with that movie because the book is so good. And but I really liked Misery, and I was mortified by it the first time I saw it because I hadn't seen a lot of scary movies, and so it hit me in a way that it might not have had I been more desensitized to violence. Although we'll talk about that as we get into it, because I expected certain scenes to bother me less this time that didn't, which I really appreciated, because I was like, we've all become so much more desensitized to violence. There were bits that I didn't think would have the impact they used to, and still kind of cringeworthy. And I dug that about it. But anyway, it's but I picked it because it was a really early horror film for me, and it's a psychological thriller, and I always find myself more compelled by those than just your hack and slash and that sort of thing. And it's about a writer, and that always resonates with me.
Of course. So Steve, I saw your tweet, and I got to know general thoughts on this real quick before we start going.
Well, this is a tough one for me because I haven't watched this movie in a while, and I love the book. The book is incredible.
I still never allowed myself to read it because I'm afraid it'll kill the movie for me.
Oh, okay, that's probably a good thing because the book is just absolutely genius. I love everything about it, and then the movie is just okay. The big thing that bugs me about it is I don't know when I'm supposed to be scared, because Annie is hilarious in far too many scenes. They were when she breaks his legs, that's kind of scary, but that's more in the actor's reaction to having his leg smashed than it is anything to do with her.
Well, this is weird because this is an Emmy-winning performance for her.
Yeah, Academy Award winner. And I don't get that. I think she's kind of hilarious and over the top.
See, for me, this is as someone that has read the book and seen the movie. And let me just say, the first time I ever saw this story was in a play that was done at a local theater. And it's not like a really small theater, not like the biggest theater here in town. It's nice mid-level, so they get to experiment with a lot of stuff. And this is, as far as I know, one of the first places to put Misery on as a play.
Oh, cool.
And they did a fantastic job of it, and just instantly made me fascinated with the story. So I went and read the book first, and then I didn't even know there was a movie till I told someone that I'm reading the book, and they told me that there was a movie. So I've kind of seen a lot of different versions of this. The book is better, but only because of character stuff with Paul, as opposed to anything about Annie. Her performance is absolutely amazing. So I'm really curious
Steve,
to see.
I don't find anything funny about it.
The Liberace moment, but otherwise no.
Oh yeah, no, that's kind of dumb. That's fair. But I mean, like there are, well, dumb's not the right word. I mean, it's just there are moments that I feel like, I don't know. Steve, is it a historical perspective thing, maybe?
No, because I mean, I've seen a lot of movies from this era, and I've seen this actress in other things too. So, I mean, I usually like Kathy Bates. I think she's good in other things, and I've seen her play more serious roles both after this and before this. Here, she feels like she's just too over the top. Like a big thing with Stephen King fiction all over the place is one of the most oppressive figures tend to be like overbearing religious or Christian women.
Right.
Like this is the thing he does for most of his early work, and when it's introduced here, it doesn't really mean anything. It's just kind of a random character quirk. And when she freaks out about little details like the cursing or like calling it serials as opposed to chapters, none of that really felt like it was genuine. It just felt like he was kind of kooky.
And see, okay, you might be reacting to it because you know more details from the book that I don't know, but I might have made inferences just based on what past we do get and what she seems to be obsessed with, because the assumption I made, and I feel like there's a fair bit of evidence to back this up, is that she is that she is obsessed with this kind of perfect life that she was never able to have because of what happened to her husband.
What do you mean? What happened to her husband?
Well, like, this is a thing that I was actually kind of confused by. Did she kill the guy, or?
I don't know if she killed her husband or not. The most we really get about her past is that she was married at one point, but that she was also a nurse and kept killing babies.
Right, but that'll happen
reason.
afterwards, because the big thing that she and Paul seem to have in common is that they used to be married and they're not anymore, and that affected them.
Okay, see, I never really got the inference that she killed her husband. I mean, I don't remember that being a detail from the book.
Yeah, there is a newspaper clipping that has something to do with that, but I wasn't sure if I seem to remember there being a newspaper clipping where she killed somebody before the kids, and I assume that's what it was.
I might have, I know there's one where a doctor died, and then the next one is she became the head nurse.
Yeah, this is before that even.
Okay.
It was one of the first things we see as he's pouring through the, and I thought it was hilarious that like it's just wholesome memories in the, it's like memories, and then you go through, you're like, oh my god.
Well, that's just standard crazy person fare. I mean, if you don't have a cherished photo album of all the horrible things you've done, then you're just not a good, honest American. No, but for me, I never really got that inference, but I'd totally buy that interpretation because, I mean, how could she not, you know? Just given the kind of person that she clearly is, I can't see how she wouldn't do something like that.
Yeah, I mean, she's just, she's super manipulative and bipolar, and she's, and she's, totally controlling, and so, his books represent the, perfect, wholesome, almost Quaker-esque life that she wished she had.
Gotcha.
And Steve, that's why I didn't think that she was as over the top as you did, because I don't think that the old-fashioned stuff comes from nowhere.
No, I think that's fair. I think part of my problem is we don't know Paul nearly enough for me to get what her obsession with him as a person is really. She's clearly grasping at straws and trying to relate to this book character, but we don't get enough of Paul. In the book, you don't realize how many months have passed for a long period of time, and there are chapters in the book where sometimes it's only a sentence, sometimes it's entire pages where nothing happens, and the whole idea is that this guy is slowly going mad because he has no idea how much time is passing, and because he's a writer, he's imagining things that are happening around the house or outside the room or outside in the real world.
See, that's cool, but that's really hard to put on screen.
Exactly.
Let me jump in before it becomes irrelevant, Steve. You said we don't know enough about Paul and what she sees in him.
Yeah.
I think that's actually really important because to her, he's not a person.
Yeah,
he's
exactly.
Like holy figure that she's put up on a pedestal, and he could do no wrong.
No, I get that. I just feel like Paul needs to be fleshed out more as to why she would think that.
I don't agree with that. Honestly, I mean, I feel like it's a movie that's about how we look at famous people through their work, and we don't really know who they are. All we have is their work, so we like aggrandize them, and we create gods out of them. And and she gets him to her house, and she reads his last book, and he's not who she thought he was. I mean, I like that about it. I don't know that I need a bunch of personal stuff about him, Steve. I mean, again, if I had gotten into his head in the book, I might have been disappointed that I didn't in the movie. But just looking at it on its own terms, I kind of like that, and I also like how internalized he is. He does so much really great acting just with his face. Like, I kind of like how subtle that is. I don't know how much more I need to know about him.
Yeah, I mean, the performance is fantastic, if nothing else.
But I'm sorry, we should let Steve respond to me because I'm kind of picking a fight.
Oh no, go ahead.
No, I mean, I get that, and all that stuff is definitely there. I think my issue, though, is more so that, she's clearly latching on to this idea of a person before she's latching on to the actual person. But when he does any amount of things with her, when he does any of the, like, trying to manipulate her, or when he tries to poison her or have dinner with her, like, there are all these scenes where he's trying to be clever and he's trying to get out of this. And I want to root for him, but I'm really just rooting for him because he's a random dude locked up in a crazy woman's house. And I wish a lot of the elements of writing and what who the person actually is shine through more, so we get out of the sense that he's just a fantasy. He's a fantasy to her, but he shouldn't be to us.
I think that's fair. For me, I think some of that shines through in the ways in which he's trying to get out, because it's all very, like, I wouldn't think of that in a million years kind of thing. It is really clever, the ways he's trying to get away from her.
Also, I found him wonderfully sympathetic in how, I mean, he's kind of a tragic figure until it all works out at the end, where he's trying so hard to move on from this popular fiction he feels like he has to write because it makes him a lot of money and there's a lot of pressure on him to do that, and he thought got past it, and that's the moment this happens to him.
Mm-hmm.
And like I don't know, that made him real enough to me. Because I mean he's got, I don't know, Steve, like, he's got a clear motivation. He's got a clear thing that he wants that's an internal conflict on top of an external conflict. It's not just about a random guy trying to get out of somebody's house. It's about somebody trying to move on with his life and create the art he really wants to create. And this is the representation. Especially, I love the scene where she sets the new manuscript on fire. This whole situation represents his public he can't get past.
Yeah, mm-hmm. I guess I'm just not able to, and I guess that's totally fair. I guess I'm just not able to separate the book from the movie, because one of the greatest things about the book is that it was written because everyone thought that Stephen King can't do anything except horror. He wrote The Eyes of the Dragon, and everyone hated it because it wasn't a horror book. And at the same time, he was battling with alcoholism and drug addiction. So he personified all of that in Annie, and in writing this book. And so much of the nuances of being not only a famous person, but the pressure of what the audience expects versus what your mind is telling you, and the loudness of ideas that are not your own, are so fleshed out in the book that I seem to, like, subconsciously really miss it in the movie.
Fair enough.
But isn't it really interesting that what we have here, Steve, is an accessible movie about inaccessible fiction?
Hmm. Yeah. That's
like what they've created is a movie that is easily watchable and digestible by the kinds of people that would be, and I don't mean to sound pretentious when I say this, short-sighted and unthoughtful enough to enjoy the books he was writing that she loved.
Yeah.
So you see why you're not appreciating it as much because of that, but, like, that's what it is. And I don't know if that's on purpose, but, like, it's something of an achievement that they were able to take that material and make it so digestible for, like, a general public.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that makes sense. I mean, there aren't a lot of differences between the book and the movie. It's just a matter of the book getting more in depth with some of the ideas. And I guess that's just kind of where I'm stuck.
And how do you do that if you can't get in his head? I mean, like, I'm scared to death of seeing the miniseries they're making of the time travel JFK novel.
Oh yeah, we talked about that.
Because some of the stuff that goes on in that book is just a lot. I imagine just a lot more interesting when I'm in the head of that guy. And once again, a writer. So I mean, like, you know, he has. Yeah. He thinks. I mean, one of the reasons I think that Stephen King writes about so many writers isn't just the write what you know thing, but also because it's so easy to buy somebody thinking out everything like they do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Let me get in real quick before we move on too much. One thing that I do really miss from the book that is very, very fundamental to Paul's character arc in the book that's not even kind of present in the movie is there's that last scene in the movie where he's got the book that he wrote that his publisher is talking up. It's going to win all these awards and the critics love it and everything. And it's going to sell really well too. And he goes, I wrote it for me. In the book, it's Misery Lives that she is talking about. And he's dealing with this like really big struggle throughout the entirety of the book, dealing with Annie and everything, because he can't help but admit to himself that it's the best thing he's ever written.
Oh man, see now you're hurting the movie because that's cool.
Yeah, I don't know if it really hurts the movie, and it is missing from it, and is instead replaced by kind of a random detective that I don't know how I feel about. But it is that is like the one thing that I do think is the biggest problem with the movie that in where it went away from the book is because I love that element of it is. What she makes him write is the greatest thing he's ever written.
Well, and that's the thing. I don't know how you could have worked that in.
Well, you don't really read many. Like, I think there are maybe 2 or 3 passages of Misery Lives that show up in the book. But honestly, it is just him admitting that to himself. And like, I think you could have worked it into the movie by just having that be the thing that the publicist is talking to him.
Yeah, but he doesn't take it with him. Like they have clearly changed that on purpose.
No, he burns it still in the book.
He still back and rewrites it?
Yeah, and then goes back and rewrites.
Oh, cool.
So it is one of those things where like he can't help but lie to himself that he can't lie to himself about it being the greatest thing he's ever written. So I think there's also an interesting commentary with like, you know, he's obviously trying to distance himself from his fan base, if you will, and there is a very harsh critique of fandom, like overzealous fandom, let's say. Yeah. He's trying to distance himself, but at the same time, there's a little bit of Stephen King kind of begrudgingly admitting that your fans push you to do your best work because that's what they expect of you.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, like, where is that balance of fan ownership? And you hear writers and creators of things all the time say, this is mine, it's not yours. But then that's not always wholly true either, is it?
Yeah. So like that's the one thing I really do miss, and it is one of the best parts of Paul's character.
Steve, you know what's going to happen, don't you? This is going to be exactly like the Daredevil director's cut was right after seeing Daredevil for me.
Oh yeah, that's definitely it.
Like because we did our commentary on that, and I was already starting to get more down on it again. Where I was like, oh, this is not nearly as good as I remembered it. And then I watched the TV show, and I was like, I'm never watching that movie again.
Yeah.
And when I finally sit down and read this book, I will probably never watch this movie again. I
don't think so because I still enjoy both of them. Like, the performances alone, I think, make the movie worthwhile.
I also am not saying I'm really never going to watch the Daredevil director's cut again, because I do love me some Colin Farrell, but...
No, but, like, the differences between the book and the movie are very apparent, because the cop character isn't involved at all. I don't remember how Paul gets out of the house.
Yeah, so enlighten us, Steve, if you remember.
I'm trying to remember off the top of my head. It's been a little while since I've read it. I know there is a cop character in the book. Like, there's a state trooper that shows up, and it's the same kind of thing where she kills him because he finds her in the basement. He finds him in the basement, and once he finishes writing, The two have a fight, and Paul kills her with the typewriter, which is instantly interesting. And she refuses to go down for a while, and she like stumbles around and goes to like a barn, where she just finally gives up and dies. And at that point, he's able to crawl out of the room and get out through the front door, because she doesn't have time to lock it at that point.
Oh, okay.
But part of what I like about the death in the book is that the instrument of it is the typewriter. That so much of the action in that final scene, and so the way King describes it, focuses on how it feels to hold that thing, it being so heavy and him being so hurt. That it's the thing that she gave him, and yet he uses it to kill her.
And I remember a lot about, like, because word processors were a thing now. I remember, like, part of Paul's superstition and everything was he refused to use a word processor. Everything had to be done on a typewriter. Otherwise, it wasn't the same, so he was very, like, attached to that.
Yeah, and he was very meticulous about how he described the feeling of those keys and the differences between that and a regular keyboard.
And isn't this a situation that would make you more superstitious? Like, the rest of his life,
right?
He's going to stay away from anything with a penguin on it.
Damn it, we don't have time for silliness.
He's going to take all the M's off the typewriters.
Yeah, right?
And the book
He's going to only write on smudged paper.
I mean, the book deals with that a little bit. Like, the moment he escapes, when he gets back to New York, he becomes an alcoholic. He's not able to get over what happened to him. He gets, like, writer's block. And every little thing nudges him and scares him more over what happened with Andy.
We get nothing except for that epilogue.
Yeah.
I think that was enough to imply that was definitely the case, though.
No, that's true, but I mean, the book ended on, like, a much more disparaging note.
Yeah.
And that experience is going to be with him for his whole life. And
I mean,
the movie does that subtly, but I feel like there's more to say.
You're right. You get that sense a little bit with him seeing Kathy Bates in The Waitress, but you're right. I wouldn't have been able to infer, like, he's an alcoholic now, and he's like he seems like he's doing as well as I could expect someone that went through that to go. I also like his reaction to his publisher trying to get him to write an autobiography about it.
Oh yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that, when he's like, I kind of think you're just trying to milk some money out of the worst thing that ever happened to me.
Right. I guess the one other thing I miss about the book is she doesn't hobble him. Well, I suppose you could call it that. She cuts off his foot as opposed to like breaking his ankles in the book.
Oh yeah, I wonder why they felt the need to reel it back like they did.
They talk about it a little bit from a production standpoint because they wanted to keep it as close as possible. And you see that for the most part. But they weren't able to get the whole cutting off his leg thing because they felt like it just would be too graphic and it might have pushed the rating up higher than they wanted it to.
Gotcha.
Which makes sense. And they also said, there's a quote somewhere where they said that they wanted it to be about the chess match between those two characters and not about the horrific or gory elements, which I understand, I guess.
And then that because that scene, like I said, that was the big thing I was thinking of when I said that I thought that it wouldn't be as hard to watch as it was. Yeah, that scene is still really hard to sit through.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Also in the book, like, it's, in the movie you get the sense that after she does that, it's pretty soon after that he's able to escape. But in the book, it's after she cuts off his foot, he's still there for an extended period of time. Like, he talks about how he said the wrong thing on Thanksgiving and she got the electric knife, and that's how he lost his thumb.
Oh my god.
Yeah, so it's like he's there for a lot longer in the book as well. But
I mean, we don't really know how long he's there in the movie, which is just another thing. Like in the book, I hate that we're constantly comparing it, but I mean, just another thing in the book is that he talks about the February that never ended, because the calendar in his room is constantly stuck on February.
Oh,
and he finds out that he's been there for weeks and weeks and months, and you kind of go mad and you get frustrated with him because you understand exactly how much of his life was ripped away from him being stuck in this tiny room. In the movie, it's kind of strange. Like, he acts like it's only been there for a little while. You see it in his face a little bit when his plan to poison her doesn't work and it's so much of his time gone there. But I feel like that needed to be a little bit more to the forefront. Like, he's been there for months and months at a time. He doesn't look it.
And see, I don't buy that, Steve. I mean, like, the poison thing, I'm with you, is maybe hard to swallow. That poison. I mean, it's maybe hard to swallow that it would that he's only there for as little time as I think he probably is. But I mean, given the fact that I think that they intentionally made it a shorter period of time so they wouldn't have to make you buy a bunch of time jumps and stuff, and that's why they went ahead and used the local sheriff as opposed to doing that any other way, because there's no way that guy was looking for him for months and months.
Yeah.
I just don't buy that. I mean, like, and I'm not sure, see, we're not told how many novels he read is the thing. Like, if we had a sense of how long he'd been reading, that might help a little bit, but I don't think it's more than 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah, I don't think it's more than that either.
The way it plays.
I would say it's probably closer to like 2 months.
Maybe a couple months. Yeah. But
because it's like you start to see some of the snow kind of melting as the movie goes on.
That's what I was going to say, but it's definitely not any longer than that because you don't have a huge shift in seasons. Although, do you guys remember where exactly they are?
They're up north somewhere.
So I mean, it would be colder longer.
Probably like upstate New York or something, I imagine.
Yeah, well, I think they actually give us a city at the beginning, but I just don't remember, or a state, but I can't remember.
On the Wikipedia, it was Colorado that they were in.
Colorado, that's right, okay.
Oh, okay. I was wrong. I was very, very far off, a couple thousand miles. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, that's fair. Like, and Steve's right. I hate to keep comparing it to the book. I do like them fairly equally. I think the performances of the actors balance out the stuff that's missing from the book for me, which is kind of rare because I mean, most of the time, you know, the cliche is, "Oh, how'd you like the movie that's based on the book? The book was better." But for me, I often do find that things can even out when you weigh them on based on different things, and this is one of those movies for me that does because. For me, it's all in the performances. I love how completely unpredictable Kathy Bates is in this. And, you know, the Liberace moment is comic relief, but it just shows you how unbearable she is to be around because, you know, romance, Liberace, that's like a 13-year-old girl from 1967's reaction.
Yeah.
Like, she's clearly not a proper adult, and that would just be a very hard person to be at literally the mercy of moment to moment.
And see, I'm a little bit on the fence about the details because Steve is right about his point that it might. Well, I guess you were talking more about him and not knowing enough stuff. But I mean, like, there's a part of me that would love to get all of her background fleshed out, and there's another part of me that likes how subtly done it is, where like you can kind of put together all these details and try to piece it together yourself. And I feel like. I feel confident in thinking that it's not just a bunch of random elements that don't go together. I like things like she's always scarier when it rains.
Yeah, she's clearly manic depressive.
And stuff like that. And there's I wondered things like I think I like how subtle it is about some of this stuff. Like when she says that she's gonna make it a murder suicide and she's gonna and she promises him that after she kills him she's gonna kill herself. I wondered again if she murdered her husband, if that's how she did it. Like she killed him and said she'd kill herself and then she didn't.
It's possible.
All these cool little questions that I sort of like not knowing at the end, I think.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, your imagination can kind of go wild with just the way the film leaves just the right number of holes, and I guess that works for you since you didn't get a chance to read the book, so the movie definitely has a much better impact.
Well, I think that's the reason that I feel like he's fleshed out enough for me, because I feel like I'm in his head enough, or at least that I'm kind of experiencing it with him, because I don't know any more than he does.
Yeah, that's fair. And I mean,
and we never know any more than he does. Like, even when we go to the sheriff, like, the sheriff never really knows all that much more than he does.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And like Ian said, a lot of that also just goes to James Caan, the acting. Like, he's phenomenal in this movie. He's exactly like I picture him in the writing.
Oh, that's cool.
And he was like the dead last choice for it, which is funny.
Really?
Yeah, like it was offered to Harrison Ford, Michael Douglas, Dustin Hoffman, Robert De Niro, Al Pacino. I think Robert Redford was in there somewhere. The guy who was in Dick Tracy, what's his name?
Oh yeah, and who directed it too?
Yeah, like everyone was a contender for the part except this guy, and then suddenly he got it.
That's a big name list to beat out everybody.
Well, I
on.
think I don't think he beat. I think they didn't want to do it.
Yeah, they all turned it down.
I mean,
Everyone turned it down.
Still.
But
Still.
I don't know. I think it serves it better that it was somebody that wasn't as recognizable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Although, I mean, Kathy Bates was already a name.
Though I do kind of want to see the Harrison Ford version of Cocksucker.
I assume this would be the sort of role that Harrison Ford would enjoy more than some other things because he doesn't like genre stuff.
Yeah.
There's an interview with Cannon where he talks about part of the reason the role is so great is that he's not a proactive hero as much as he's just someone responding to good and bad information. So his moods and his ideas and his images are constantly shifting, and that's a lot harder to play than the Han Solo-esque always knows what he's doing kind of hero.
Well, and I think that's believable, too, because there's, and again, I might be reading way too much into this, but I can't help throughout it wondering if there aren't places where he's thinking, yeah, why don't I just let it end?
Oh,
yeah.
That's very present in the book.
Is it? I mean, that was the sense I got from the film was that I mean, like, you know, he's written his last misery novel, especially after. I mean, maybe like I don't think he's got anything like a death wish until if he does it all until you know she destroys his new manuscript, and then he's got to have like a bit of maybe I should just give up now.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Because I think that's what the manuscript scene is should I die or should I continue to live? Because this is like, I guess the only thing I can compare it to is Buried in 72 Hours, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
It's that impossible situation, survivalist kind of movie with a very hard horror edge to it. Because, like, you wouldn't call Buried a horror movie. It's a suspenseful movie. It's a very character-focused film because, you know, it's Ryan Reynolds in a coffin.
One guy in a coffin, yeah.
Yeah, but it's not. I would kind of back off from calling that a horror movie, but this I clearly agree would be a horror movie. So it's you know kind of this weird blending, and it doesn't really fit into any one particular genre perfectly. But where else do you put it?
Although one thing, and I think it immediately gets that just because it's a Stephen King novel where somebody gets their legs broken.
Right.
So immediately we're going to say, oh, okay, it's a horror movie. Like I think one of my complaints about it is that I think there are a couple of cliches and just like over the top things thrown in, especially at the end, just to make it seem more like a consummate horror film.
Could you give an example?
I don't need I don't usually do this, but we can swear on your channel, yeah.
Yeah. Totally.
I don't need the cocksucker bit.
I don't know. It's really fun to see her just break down and yell that, because she's so uptight and everything.
Well, okay, you know what? That's fair. Yeah, because you know what? Until I said that, I forgot. She says that, doesn't she? I thought it was him for a minute. No, that works.
No, yeah, that was my bad. I confused the lines. He says, "Choke on it, you bitch," and she calls him a cock.
Yeah, and I don't know. I guess in the moment that always, and I never liked that. That always struck me as just kind of like your standard scary movie third act thing to do. But I guess her doing that after all the cockadookie and all that stuff is kind of fun.
Cockadookie cock.
And that's where Steve wins when he says she is funny.
I don't know. I didn't realize I was watching a thriller for a little while with this movie. But I don't know. You guys are kind of swaying me on her.
Also,
again, Kathy Bates an actress that I really, really like.
Well, again, remember, I first saw this when I was 12, so I was very impressionable the first time I saw this. Although, it could have not held up at all, and I was surprised as I watched it just how much it did for me.
Yeah, as far as Stephen King adaptations go, this is one of the better ones.
Yeah.
Now, do you guys remember, since we're talking about...
But that's setting the bar pretty low, Steve. There's a lot of really bad ones.
While we're talking about how...
Time.
Oh, I love Christine. Well, while we're talking, though, about how Kathy Bates' performance kind of drifts between uncomfortably funny and really friggin' scary, do you guys remember a couple years back when, like, they used the scene where she's hobbling him for a DirecTV ad?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Like, that was so weird and inappropriate to put on national television that could just play during your child's cartoon.
Yeah, that was creepy. Yeah, that shouldn't play until 10 o'clock at night on Fox when you're watching 24.
Right? Because that'll feel like a step down at that point.
Ian, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to say Christine. I meant to say Maximum Overdrive.
Yes, very different movies.
Like, no, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I'm just saying, you were like, no, I like her. I'm like, okay, fine. Then we'll watch Maximum Overdrive.
Or It.
It.
Or
God, It. No, there are plenty of Stephen King movies where Stephen King films that are just god awful, and most of them are the ones where he cameos. Like that's a really good way to tell, because like they did that remake of The Shining because he hated Kubrick's version, and like honestly it was like watching The Shining again, but all the subtlety was just literally sucked out of that film. And Stephen King I think plays like a pizza boy in it at some point or something. So no, like he clearly has a bad track record in adaptations of his works, especially the ones that he approves of. This is one of those rare exceptions but to be fair, the guy puts out a lot of things. Eventually, if you make enough of them into movies, something's gonna stick.
Well, and this is, in some ways, this is one of the easier ones to get right.
Yeah, it is very simple.
Because it's a simple story. Your actors have to really carry it, but you cast the right people and you don't overwrite it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, that's not to take away from the fact that it is working really well. But I do think it's one of those concepts that, like, if you screw this up, that's really sad. Like, this is a harder one to screw up, I think.
Yeah, I mean, like, you look at other Stephen King works, and they tend to have a lot of time jumps. They juggle dozens and dozens of characters. Some of them are just there for exposition. Some of them actually have personalities, and it's tough to adapt any one of those unless you're doing, like, a full-on TV miniseries. And even
that's
then,
why the miniseries thing makes sense, but then you'd think more of those would be good.
Yeah, you'd think so.
Right.
Like, what's it called? The Stand is a really great book, and I don't like any of the adaptations of that. And that's partly just because that's something that you have to read.
Yeah, I haven't read a ton of King, but does he do that Lovecraft thing where, like, you can't really physically show what he's talking about? It all has to just take place in your head, trusting what the narrator is saying? Because, like, Lovecraft will do that a lot, where it'll be like, what I saw, words cannot describe. But it was the most horrifying thing imaginable. And so that's what makes Lovecraft stuff scary. Does King do that a lot?
I mean, I'd make the argument that what he tends to do is he describes it in such a vivid way that putting it on screen just doesn't do enough service to what he wrote.
Yeah, especially when you have such low budgets sometimes.
But yeah, I mean, you will have sections, but this is true with most fiction, really, where some really there's like because you have vivid telling in books, just like you have vivid showing. People always say show don't tell, but telling's important too. And sometimes what you'll vividly tell in a book has to be put on screen in some sort of a way that feels organic, but is still, you have to contrive a way to do it. And I think, I don't know, that's just a thing that's not handled real well in a lot of those adaptations, because they have to truncate 600-page novels into an hour and a half.
Yeah.
But that's true of a lot of things.
Oh, definitely. And so, like I said, he produces so much stuff that eventually some of it's going to stick to the wall, is what it comes down to. And I mean, like, I hate to go to Family Guy, but Family Guy, I think, had my favorite take on Stephen King, where it's like he's got a meeting with one of his publishers, and they're like, so what do you got for us? A lamp monster. And he just, like, grabs a lamp off the guy's desk and starts, like, pointing it at him. He's like, you're not even trying anymore. Rah! Ha! 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 When can you have it to me? That's kind of true, because, like, you can tell when he's actually put passion into something, and you can tell when he kind of just wrote something because, he needed a little bit of spending money or whatever. And people will buy it because it says Stephen King, and he has that fan base, and it's one of those things where I think Stephen King is very aware of his fan base, and that's why we get some subtle, not so subtle commentary.
Well, that's why this protagonist is so interesting, because that's who this guy is. This is the guy that's been milking it.
Right?
I think that's so cool. I mean, like, we were told over and over again when I was in college, going to school for creative writing, don't write stories about writers. Just don't do that. It's like it's the most obvious cliche thing to do. It's done to death. You're probably gonna be really don't do it. And every time Stephen King does it, it seems to, at least of the few things I've read, they seem to be his better books.
Yeah, definitely. Like, my favorite book by him is what's it called? Salem's Lot, and that's all about a writer. It seems like every one of all of his best books involve writers in some way, or at least involve discussion of the craft.
I'm trying to remember the name of the story. I think it took place in 4 seasons, where we got Shawshank Redemption was in that book. It was 4 short novellas. And like Stephen King had a preamble to it, and he's like, "This is one of my stories about writers, and the last time I did that, it was really successful." And even though I didn't think it was that good, like that's the thing is, this is one of those books that Misery, from what I understand, from what little I've heard him talk about it, is not one of his favorites of his own work. So he tried to write something about a writer and make it a lot better. And it's one of those things where I always am impressed when a writer doesn't really care or doesn't really put much stock into something they've written that a lot of people really attach themselves to. And you know, we're getting it gets very meta very quickly, but how much of it is just fan base getting into the like investing themselves into the work, and the writer like dismissing them, and how much of it is the writer just trying to keep an air of like superiority. And
I think a lot of it, especially in this case, not having read an interview with him talking about it, so I don't know this for sure, of course, but I would imagine that with something like this, it might be this perspective thing of when you write a thing like this, there's so much of yourself in it that you might feel like it's so close to home that it's just too on the nose and it's not like original or creative enough, but nobody else is in your head, so it works. But for yourself, it doesn't work. I mean, I've written things like this where I'm like, no, I'm cheating, man. I'm writing about people that have done all the things I've done. But a lot of the time, of course, obviously, that makes for some of the most realistic and believable stuff. And so that's where you have to strike this interesting balance between writing for yourself and what you think you'd want to read versus writing for someone else who isn't you and will appreciate these things even more than you because they didn't go through them like you did.
Yeah. I have nothing else to add. That's brilliant, Captain Logan. That's why I like talking to you, because like brilliant observations just come out of nowhere.
You just put that on the back of the DVD of the movie. I think that's
right?
Pretty much sums it up.
We've been doing a lot of praising of this, or Steve's complained some, but I haven't got to complain yet. Can I complain a little bit?
Go for it.
Because I probably made this. It seemed like I worship this movie. I like it a lot, but it's got problems. I'd like to complain about things.
Go for it.
One thing that I think is absolutely hilarious is that you have this typical. I mean, it's worthy of like an episode of like Murder, She Wrote, or I think even that show is usually better than this. Or even like a Diagnosis Murder, where you've got this police officer or this sheriff who just happens to not only read the line but writes it down in the book that he later sees in a newspaper. Like, why did that line hit him as relevant?
It is one of those weird things, and like I've kind of flopped that around in my head to try to think if there is an explanation for it. And the only thing I can think of is it is a really small town, and he's obviously knows who Annie is and is probably aware of her history and that she was on trial for something really bad. So I think when he's reading the books, he reads that and it reminds him of something, so that's why he writes it down.
Okay, that makes sense if that's what it's supposed to be, but it does watch, at least it watched to me, like he stumbled upon both of them and they just happened to match up, as opposed to that leading him, his reading that leading him to go find that newspaper.
That definitely could have been a little bit more clear, yeah.
Yeah, like it's stretching a little bit, but I think it's there enough, because he does kind of like that like, kind of Sherlock Holmes level detective where he doesn't take anything on surface value. There's always something deeper, there's always something left unexplained, or there's some kind of connection that everyone else isn't seeing. Because, I mean, he has that with the car, like they pulled the car out of the snow and everyone just assumes that Sheldon crawled out and went and died somewhere in the woods and maybe got eaten by animals, so we're never going to find his body. But, like, he's the one that looks at the car and notices, no, that's not right. And even before that, they're driving down the road and, there's the tree that's kind of like cracked over and stuff, and he thinks that maybe a car could have hit it or something, and like his wife is all, oh no, it could just be the winds got too strong or the ice got too heavy or blah blah blah. So, like, he does have a lot of those moments where he's able to see things or make connections that other people aren't.
He's got an intuition, yeah, although I found it somewhat comical or hard to swallow that he picked up on that piece of evidence with all those other cops swarming around. Nobody noticed then.
Yeah. Yeah.
You got all these city cops, and you're the only one that caught that? Like, no.
Yeah, I'd agree with you there. That one is probably the biggest problem.
I think you got me on the first thing I said. That makes a great deal more sense now that I've talked to somebody else about it.
No, I mean, it is kind of vague, and it could be given a little more solidity to it, because, I mean, he clearly doesn't trust Annie.
Yeah.
Like, he knows something's going on with her. And, like, it is portrayed, at least, as such a small town. I mean, you know, he walks into the convenience store and just walks behind the register to put his money in.
Yeah, all those details about how small the town is were really fun for me.
Yeah, so, like, it is passable for me to believe that he'd know who she is.
Yeah, but that's why I wondered, like, because the thing that gets him on her trail is simply she walks into the store, looks really creepy, and walks out. And he is like, there might be something to this creepy, crazy lady. And I was like, you already knew who she was. Why were you suspecting her simply helicopter flying over her house?
Yeah, and for me, I think the sheriff is one of the biggest problems with the movie, because he is kind of all over the place and a little bit, you know, it is a little bit of a stretch to get to some of the places he does. But at the same time, I just love the performance so much. It's so good.
It totally makes you almost okay with some of those contrivances. He really is just a plot device so that the end of the third act can happen.
Yeah, and I just love the guy to death, and, like, the relationship that they write in with his wife, where, like, they're, you know, they have, like, this, what is he called, that spice or whatever?
Yeah, that's so funny. And what hurts it, of course, is that you get to the end and he gets murdered and you never see her again.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just one of those things where, like, can you forgive a plot hole because of a performance? And I think it's passable as long as there's some kind of logic. If you can spin a reason out of it that isn't, you know, magical, I think it's okay to do.
Yeah, the problem, of course, is just that, you know, you make me really like that guy, even though he is kind of a plot device, and then at the end of the day, he really is just a plot device. Like if only we had gone back to his wife and found some way to get her back in there for a second.
Yeah, and I mean, that could have been done with another scene.
Now he's done. Now he's gone, and I guess I wasn't supposed to invest in their relationship at all.
Yeah. I don't know, it would have been interesting, like, after he got the cops there or something, or the cop, because she would have had to be the one to respond, if she was talking to Paul.
See, they should have done that.
Yeah, if she was the one that was, like, debriefing Paul and talking to Paul as, like, you know, as she got to the scene with, you know, an ambulance or whatever.
Get some of my notes. Speaking of observation skills, I find myself wondering if Paul shouldn't have been smart enough to realize that all the other knickknacks were facing a certain way.
Yeah.
And then put the penguin back there. Now, I mean, he's in a hurry and all, and I get that, and so, yeah, you know, again, that it's probably okay, but I found myself going, no, that guy would have more of an attention to detail for that, especially because he's got the reflexes to catch the thing before it falls on the ground. You'd think he'd look back up at the table and be like, everything's, because there's like 20 things on that table. Everything's facing the same direction.
I mean, he does the exact same thing with the medicine. Like, when he grabs that first packet of pills, he arranges it so it looks so the next one in the row is exactly like the one he just took. To stop and do that, he might as well do the thing with the penguin.
Yeah, and it is one of those things where
he's got to notice something. She's got to notice something later. I do like that she notices it a lot earlier before you're sure if she does. Find yourself wondering for a long time how much she's just messing with him. And, you know, because he's trying to manipulate her, and it's all, you know, like you were mentioning earlier, Ian, the chess match, she is steps ahead of him the whole movie.
Mm-hmm. Now, I'm curious, I'm trying to remember the order of things in the movie. That scene where she's, like, really depressed because it's raining, and all she does is walk in and give him the pills, and then has that speech where it's like, do you know what it would mean for someone like me to lose someone like you?
Yeah.
Does that take place after the first time he gets out of the room?
Yes.
Okay, so that really does add to it.
Yes.
Because she's aware from then. Like
Probably.
with the reveal later.
It's possible that any time she walked out into the living room, that's when she caught it.
Mm-hmm.
So it didn't have to be the first time she came back?
Yeah. So, that's one of the things where I was trying to place that in my head. I'm like, wait, did that happen? Because it's weird because she's in this, really, really messed up dream world for her, wherein, this is the moment that she's been waiting for her whole life. She's obviously been stalking the dude. I'd make the argument that she moved to that town because she knew that he went there to write his books. Since that seems to be fairly common knowledge. She's stalking him, so this is like the opportunity of a lifetime for her, and to realize that, him being nice and having dinner with her and the nice things that he says, it's not because he actually likes her, it's because he's trying to bubble her up. And most of the time she's not picking up on that because she's just so euphoric about everything, but in that, depressive moment is when she's coming down to the reality of the situation of, yeah, he doesn't care about me, he's just being nice because I could kill him. He's tried to escape.
That's one interpretation. There's also the possibility that there are places where she's playing up the mood swings.
Yeah, I always kind of thought that she, regardless of how much she knows or doesn't know, she likes living the fantasy. So even when she knows something's off, she'll go ahead and embrace whatever praise he gives her.
Oh, I'd definitely say that's fair, especially when he flicks her off when she's outside and she goes, "You kidder."
Well, and she does that because she's in control.
Yeah.
And again, she's trying to force him into that, that world.
But at the same time, she is so delusional because, she comes in there and gives him the medication as the sheriff is pulling into the driveway and everything, and he strangles her and she puts him downstairs and stuff. And she has that line, what is it? When are we going to build a relationship of trust?
Yeah.
So, I don't know how much she could be playing up the delusions or how much she is actually delusional.
Well, she's trying to get him to give in. I mean, this is your life now. Deal with it.
Yeah. So for me, it's I think that she becomes aware of the reality at times when she is in a depressive state. But when she is giddy, she actually is believing everything that he says to her. That'd be the argument I'd make.
Real quick, because I'm just looking at some notes here, Steve. One of the reasons I think that I'm liking, besides the fact that you read the book, that I think I'm liking Paul's character and relating to him a little bit more than you is because of his nice subtle moments of sarcasm. I think my favorite line. One of my favorite lines of his in the entire movie is, "Great, I always wanted to see the other side of the room."
Yes.
Yeah, so he's well written all the way through. His dialogue's fantastic.
That's just really funny. And sad, but really funny. It's also you were talking earlier, Ian, about what's common knowledge about Paul and that he goes to that town. It's also common knowledge that he drinks Dom Perignon. That moment is so funny.
Yeah. And also, some of the humor in this movie does really get me. When the sheriff asks her what she knows about Paul, and, she starts giving him the story of his birth, it's some kind of religious tone.
And he goes, "That's not the sort of information I'm looking for."
Right. And, to get back to the delusional thing real quick, not to linger on it too long, but, she kind of, tries to play up a story to the sheriff before, while he's walking around the house. Because she has that moment where she's, talking about God gave me the inspiration and told me that I had to replace Paul, and so I've turned this room into a writing studio, and I've been writing like Paul.
Oh, you're right. No, she clearly, I'm not saying she's not delusional. I'm just saying that there are moments where I wonder if she's making it up or not. That's a moment where you are a crazy person if you're going to say that to that cop and think he's going to be less suspicious.
Well, what I like about that is that's her idea, or that's her endgame, is to keep Paul in her house forever and yet keep him writing misery novels.
Oh, yeah, good point. She's going to have some kind of a plan so that people will buy it.
Yeah, no, she's going to publish them.
Yeah.
That's the way I...
I didn't even pick up on that. That's you're right. Obviously, that's what it is, yeah.
So like she's just completely insane in that case. So I think at times when she's in the depressive mode, she's very down to earth and aware of the reality of the situation. But when she is in that like manic happy mode, she is totally buying her own bullshit. Steve, take us somewhere.
I was actually just thinking of something. So I mentioned earlier about. So I mentioned earlier about some of the religious stuff, and I guess I just kind of had a realization about a part of what it could mean. And this is in the book; it's a little bit more developed. But one of the things that I really like, and I like the comparison of, is that he's superstitious and she is also in that weird dogmatic religious way. But I think what's really fascinating about that is you sit down and you start thinking about the mechanics of how you're supposed to write a story, and the things he says where like that's not how it works, or the things about inspiration and things like that. And you start to think about every story being an example of how to write a story, but not a blueprint on how they work.
Yeah.
And so every work that he tries to do is breaking away from a dogmatic system. And something he can't necessarily do by the end of the book, but something he does kind of get away with by the end of the movie, which I think is really interesting. That there's this inherent belief in how everything is supposed to work for both of them. And she dies because she can't get over her dogmatic system, and he lives because, in a way, he's able to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting because he's able to finish the book, and he takes and moves. Well, he takes those traditional elements that are a big thing to him, and he moves past them by using them to survive. So you get that like life is the most important thing, everything else is secondary.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, I agree that is a really fascinating way to look at it. Like tradition doesn't mean anything if you're not alive to continue celebrating that tradition.
Yeah,
well, and then what's the point of keeping it alive if it's not evolving?
Yeah, and also I like that you said evolving, Steve, because the idea is why are either of them why do either of them cherish that system so much? It's because it's safe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And Steve, I agree with you. I wish we could have gotten a little more stuff on Annie's religion, like her religiosity, I guess I'd call it, if that's a word. Yeah, that's a word. You got to check sometimes. Sometimes they don't sound like it, but yeah, I wish we could have gotten just a little more on that because it would have been really interesting to see her develop it more. Because like she comes in, and I think the most it's in the book or it's in the movie is when she makes him burn the manuscript, and I'm not really remembering very many moments of it from the book itself.
The book has it's pretty sporadically. It's in the same way that it's in Carrie and in what's it called? Salem's Lot, and The Stand and stuff like that. Well, Stand's more obvious because it's all about the end of the world. But it's pretty sporadic, and it's more about her having conversations and her like reviewing the book and saying that this is great, and then she compares it to like very clear biblical parallels, and then she's just filtering the story she's reading based on this one very basic book that she's never gotten out of.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess she does compare his Misery's child to the Sistine Chapel.
Yeah, she does that in the movie one time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and again, I think the whole point of the religious aspect, I mean, I don't think that needs to be played up any more than it is, personally, just because it's part of her old-fashioned worldview, and that's simply a natural part of that. So,
okay.
So she has this obsession with things being wholesome and simple, and like everything for her is about simple and digestible. She is anti-intellectual to the max.
Yeah, like I love that.
And so that whole being super religious thing, and that's not to say that all religious people are simpletons. It's not true. But this is a case where this is a person who clings to that because she doesn't want to have to see the world for what it is. It's simpler. It's easier. And so when suddenly he's more complex and he writes a book where he shows her things as closer to how they really are, she can't accept that.
Yeah.
That's why she thinks she loves him so much from his writings, because he's writing in this, turn of the century, like, a wholesome,
old-fashioned,
ultra religious, and also I think it's important that the I would assume anyway that the town Misery is from is also this super tiny town, just like the one they're in.
Yeah, they're pretty vague on that, because, like, she's apparently, like, he reveals at least that she's apparently, like, part of a royal family, and it's complete crap.
Yeah, but fix that up later. But I mean, like I just assume that's probably like a tiny village or something.
Yeah, and, like, there's some interesting stuff here too about, like, fans not being able to accept that what they love is fiction. Like, you hear writers talk about this a lot, where they get questions from fans, like, what happened to this character after the book? And the answer, of course, is nothing. The book is over.
Yeah, didn't write that part.
Yeah, they ceased to exist, and people just can't get past that.
Yeah,
and I mean,
our answer sometimes can be, you decide.
Yeah, I mean, that's a nicer way of putting it. But certainly, it's like, I can certainly understand that and get kind of caught up in that, because, when we get a big movie that comes out, or we're getting news about a movie that's coming out, or a movie comes out, and we're like, oh, are they going to make a sequel? It could be about this, and this. I want to see where this goes, and this goes, and this goes. Like, we're comic book fans. We have that in spades, gentlemen. So I can totally understand and sympathize with that. So it is hard to remove yourself, but then when you see it, like, presented and it's so distasteful and so just like, oh wow, I don't want to be that person, and I really hope I never do anything that makes me that person.
Well, I think it's really interesting to look at it from both the perspective of a writer and a fan.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you're anybody that does anything creative for an audience, but then you're also someone who goes to conventions and gets things signed, you can kind of look at this movie easily from both perspectives.
I wonder who we could get on that might have some perspective on that. Like, there's got to be somebody that I know. Cap, you know anybody?
No, but you guys are right. I think also what's kind of interesting about that is people look at books and fiction in general as a blueprint for how their life should go, or things about their life.
Yeah.
That so many things that you see and read become the basis of who you are as a person. Like, I would be an exact 180 version of myself if I didn't watch Angel. That shit was so much a part of my life and who I am. And so fiction dies when the work is over, but it's still carried on in whatever the person takes away from it. And that's kind of a distinction that Annie isn't able to make. That the book relates to her on a lot of levels, but she isn't able to separate the fact that she is not that character. Because I think part of her also kind of wished that she was from royal lineage, just like Misery is. That every time he tries to make the character feel special, he's making her feel special.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I said earlier, she's clearly not a grown-up.
Yeah, clearly she has delusions of grandeur. She wants to be him after she's killed him.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a lot of the whole thing of, like, it's not... or when she comes in there after she finishes Misery's child, she's like, you killed her, and, like, he knew it was coming the whole time she was reading that book. He was so ready for that moment. And, like, to the fact where as soon as she comes in, he's immediately got an explanation ready to go. So you have that whole thing where it's like she just cannot separate that, it's a story, it's not real. Like, she acts as if he physically murdered this woman that she's obsessed with, even though he's a writer. And, like, so... when he was a father to this woman that she's obsessed with, he was great and perfect and the greatest dad ever. But when the character dies and she has to deal with the fact that, oh, it's not real, this character's dead now, it's this nightmare scenario, and she cannot accept it because she's not a grown adult. She's in a lot of ways just a really shitty kid.
Yeah, and wants to stay in that mentality, purposefully, and that's where I think a lot of her craziness comes from. And Ian, you were talking a lot about religion earlier. This is like somebody who, whose God suddenly does something that she thought he'd never do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you're right. It's like looking at, you know, a father of a kid that is your best friend, but then it's also like looking at God and His creation.
Yeah. There's a lot of levels to the character interactions. Like, I never really thought about that before until we started bringing it up here. And, like, the more I'm thinking about it, the more the wheels are turning and connections are being made. Because, like, originally to me, the scene where, like, you killed her, that was just a really scary scene. But now it's, like, this very deep thematic thing to her character and their relationship now. So... yeah, that's an interesting connection I hadn't made for it. This is why I like discussing movies as opposed to just reviewing them. I don't know if I'd make these connections on my own. It's nice to bounce off with people.
Real quick, in case I don't get a chance to mention it, just because I'm looking at this note real quick. I had never caught this before. Did you guys pick up on this foreshadowing? This is some of the coolest foreshadowing I've ever seen. Like 10 minutes before she breaks his legs, she has this line where she says, "I would have checked both legs to see which one was being pulled."
Oh no, didn't think of that.
Awesome.
That's good stuff.
That's really awesome. I completely forgot about that.
Yeah, I'd never caught that before.
I mean, I just thought it was a clever line, but then they get to the leg breaking.
Yep, it's right before that. It's like 10 minutes before that.
You know, in that case, I actually like the hobbling as opposed to the cutting the foot off. In the book, there's, like, I like just the way in which King describes it, because, like, you know, he goes through that she gets out the chainsaw and everything and is getting ready to cut off his foot. And he says, "As I saw the blade start to connect with the flesh, I immediately blacked out. But just beforehand, I remembered walking on the beaches of New York when I was a kid with my father, and I stepped on a piece of broken glass, and my father said to me, 'It just cut your foot. It's not like anyone lobbed it off.'" And that's the last sentence of the chapter.
Oh,
yeah. So, like, that's the memory that goes through his mind right as she's cutting off his foot. And I think that's where the biggest time jump is. After she cuts off his foot, I think we jump ahead significantly. And he mentions getting his thumb cut off in Thanksgiving dinner or something.
Yeah, because the foot thing comes pretty early in the book, if I'm remembering correctly.
No, I think it's about the midway point.
Isn't it? Because I feel like there's a lot that goes on after that foot cutting off. Like, a lot of my favorite hallucination chapters come right after that.
I'm not sure. It's been since high school since I read it, so I could be off on that. I remember certain things and not others. You know how it is.
Steve, do you think there's any significance to the specific choice of the letter N being pulled off the typewriter?
It's a good question.
Oh, Captain Logan, please Captain Logan us.
Well, I haven't been able to come up with anything that I was just curious. Maybe Steve had an idea, or Ian, if you have an idea.
No, I'm just ready for, like, this great, monumental thing that ties...
I hate to disappoint you, sir, but I don't have anything.
Damn it, Captain Logan! This is your thing. You're phoning it in, man. I'm upset.
For not?
I'm gonna cobble you for not delivering on...
I'm sorry. But I'm not taking your pills. And I need better paper.
Oh, man. Like, he tries so hard to convince her that it's for her own good to get different paper, and, like, he knows he's digging his own grave as he does it, too. He is so dreading that moment. That's a good scene. Like I said, the acting in this sells this movie for me. Not quite as strong plot-wise as the book, maybe, but the acting just sells everything.
I gotta be honest with you, I'm really glad I picked this now. Because first of all, I didn't know that you guys were familiar with the material as well as you are. I mean, I figured you'd maybe seen it once, but I didn't know that either of you had read the book. Like, you know this better than I do. I've not read it. But also, I kind of assumed I'd come on and you guys wouldn't like it nearly as well as I did, so.
Oh, no, I love
it more now.
Oh, well, that's good. It's always a good day when we can convince Steve that he was wrong about something.
Not at all. Well, and it's not that I don't enjoy arguing when people have different opinions than me, but I kind of figured I watched this again and it totally worked, and then I talked to you guys and you're like, this doesn't hold up at all. What the hell was I watching?
No. I complete opposite opinion. I
Good.
think this is one of those movies where it might get a little better every time I watch it because like there's little things that I don't pick up on. You
The
know,
attention to detail is fantastic. I think it's really cool when you get to the end and you get to see part of the manuscript and you see all the ends missing.
Yeah, like that's a little clever detail. It's not quite, all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy for 700 pages in different languages, but it is up there.
Oh, is that what he does in the book?
No, in The Shining.
You know what? As soon as you said that, I was like, wait, isn't he talking about The Shining?
Yeah, I mean, no, Kubrick, when this was before copy and paste was a thing.
Yeah.
So keep that in mind. He made his production assistants type out all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy for hundreds of pages in different formats, so it actually looked like prose and dialogue and narration and stuff. And then they made an alternate version for every language the film was screened in.
Oh my god, that's awesome!
Yeah, you can actually go to a museum and look at the typewriter and all of the pages laid out. It's pretty cool. Yeah,
but that is one of those moments in your career where you're like, just remember, you're getting paid.
Oh, right. Monkey and Apple actually did a video where he's behind the scenes of The Shining, and he's playing Stanley Kubrick's production assistant, and he goes, "So I have to write all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy 800,762 times." That's the number that Stanley gave me. And you hear stories about Kubrick, and I totally buy it.
He was a pretty interesting guy.
Yeah,
but no, you guys read about the attention to detail. The set design for that house is fantastic. It's one of the best looking houses I've seen. Because you see a lot of movies where that just takes place in one room or one very particular location, and it's very easy to make every individual room you go to feel kind of generic without the action around it. But every room in that house has a style to it and a language to its own, and you can always just pause and look at all the little details and all the little idiosyncrasies this lady has just arranging her house.
Mm-hmm. And he even calls attention to that as oh, you're one hell of a decorator.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, good call. Well, it's super unsettling. You get upstairs and you're like, what is that room?
Yeah, it's her bedroom, and
it's almost like a dollhouse-ish kind of. You're like, what is that? I mean, Ian, you had the theory that she moved out there, but it almost looks like a childhood bedroom.
And like I said, I think she is a really disturbed child.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right.
So I think that's why that she's reading friggin' romance novels, which I mean that's what preteen girls read because they think it's proper literature. So there's just so much to this that I think it's all really indicated.
I want to know because you guys were talking about how in the book he actually publishes the book he wrote there. I want to know what the novel he writes in the movie's about. Because I think it's really interesting that the book is called Higher Education of Philip J. Stone, which just sounds like a really super random title.
Well, I think
it's fascinating that the phrase higher education is in there, given that he just dealt with this woman that, like I said, is totally non-intellectual.
Well, from what I remember, I'm trying to remember the point of the book that he wrote that she made him burn in both the book and the movie. It is left pretty much the same, that it's kind of about a street kid. So I think in the movie he may have rewritten that book.
See, we can't be sure about that though, because we weren't given a title in the first place.
Yeah, and that's the problem.
I don't know if he rewrote it. In fact, I would be very surprised if he rewrote that. I would figure that would be too hard for him.
Maybe. I don't know. It's just
because he acted like it was the greatest thing he ever wrote.
Yeah, it's just the higher education thing and the idea that it's he comes from the slums.
You're making a great case for it, but I don't think we can be sure.
Yeah, I'd agree. That's just what I think. Otherwise,
that's a great point.
Otherwise, it'd have to be Misery Lives, and that's one of the things I liked about the play that I did.
Higher Education of Misery Lives. What?
Yeah. In the play that I saw, it opens with him giving a speech at some kind of convention or whatever for Misery's child, and he's like, "Oh, this is such a great Misery novel, and I hope everyone enjoys my last outing with the character." And that's when he goes off and gets in the car wreck. And at the end of the play, he's giving a speech about Misery Lives, and he's like, "This is by far the greatest thing I've ever written, and people have asked me about writing nonfiction work about my experiences, and I just feel that it's too soon." and then lights went down and everything.
Misery Lives is the novel where she gets the black costume, but before that, there's like these 4 other miseries. There's like a cyborg misery. There's a steel misery, and
Kevin Smith writes a screenplay draft of it, and
right.
gets involved, and it just all goes to hell.
Exactly.
I can't wait to watch the documentary, The Death of Misery Lives.
The death of Misery Lives. What happened?
Yeah, and Nick
What
Cage
happened?
is going to Misery.
Nick Cage as Misery. My God, I knew you were going to say that. And then there's a video game called The Death and Return of Misery.
Yes, indeed. Okay, since we're just getting kind of silly, is there anything else anyone wanted to talk about that they had notes for or anything they wanted to make sure we brought up? No?
I mean, I had lots of random notes, but we talked this out pretty well, I think.
Okay, so let's go ahead and do a score. Cap, you're aware of our scoring system?
No,
yes,
I'm not. What is your scoring system? I have to adjust now.
Okay, it's on a 5 scale.
Oh God,
and
I can't do 5 scale. It breaks me. I can't do it. No, I'm kidding. Go ahead.
It's on a 5 scale, and you have to pick something related to the movie. So we'll let you go last, and I'll go ahead and go first.
Something related to the movie in your numbering?
Yeah. Instead of like stars, you got to pick like a noun.
I thought you meant like you got to find a number that relates to the movie and then put it into a decimal point.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
This is homework.
Damn hard. But I'm up for the challenge.
Okay. So I'll go first. Steve can go second. You'll go last. I'm gonna give Misery the film 4 out of 5 pigs named Misery. Pet pigs named Misery. Steve, go ahead.
It's weird. I'm gonna give it a higher score than you. That's odd.
Wow.
Yeah, I think I like it a lot more now. I'm gonna give it 4.5 out of 5 twisted broken ankles.
Oof.
Man, ouch.
Yeah, poor James Caan.
Well, I agree with Ian's score. I was going to go with a 4 out of 5 too, and I'm going to go at 4 out of 5 Mr. Mans.
Oh, awesome. Thank you so much, Captain Logan, for joining us for Horror Month.
Thanks for having me, guys. This was so much fun.
Indeed. All right, everyone, thank you very much for joining us for Horror Month. I hope you enjoyed it. We got a lot of videos out, more than our regular count this month, and I'm really excited about that. Stay tuned for History Month. See, it was so cool. We had, like, horror movies, which are all edgy, and now it's, like, fucking homework and shit.
Well, it just but the big twist is you're making more shows. We thought this was the last one.
That's the big twist.
What a twist!
Everyone, thank you very much for listening.
Boring ass status quo after you thought it was, it's like the aftermath nonsense. Like,
Shyamalan.
I did, like, we had a tradition of doing a Jebediah Springsteen bit every Halloween, and if I could have gotten the time to make him do it, I would have had Milan do a Jebediah Springsteen about, like, finding Captain Logan, like, crashed his car somewhere in the wilderness and nursing him back to health while making him write a book.
As scary and creepy as humanly possible.
Yeah. And I would have made you voicing it and everything. It could have been amazing.
I would have been squirming the whole time. Just like, oh, God.
I could just imagine it now. I chained his hands to the typewriter, and he complained, I can't use the keys. And I was like, write with your nose.
See, what happened was I reviewed all the superhero movies there were, so he, like, found a bunch of crappy fan films. He made me read. He's like, no, you're not done! And then when I got done with those, he just made me review all the things I'd reviewed already.
Yeah. Now re-review Batman 89, finally.
5 out of 5 scale!
Yeah. So, Steve, what are we doing next week on History Month?
Oh, yeah. What was my topic again? Oh, yeah. I've written down here. Okay, so for History Month, the first discussion we're going to do is on whether or not history is actually academically relevant. Because you always hear the phrase thrown out that history. Everyone who doesn't learn from history is doomed to repeat it. History always repeats itself, etc. And you get a lot of people that say in their particular field, history is massively important. If you study philosophy at all, philosophy is basically, here's the history for 2,500 years of thinkers, now go and do your own thing. As Ian says numerous times.
Repeat it. Go ahead. It's cool.
So that's basically what we're going to be talking about. Is it sometimes better to do things without any historical knowledge, or is that always a prerequisite?
All right, everyone, so thank you very much for listening. This is getting way too silly, so we must end it now. Until next time, I'm the Philosopher.
I'm the Politician.
And I'm Captain Logan?
Yeah, that'll work. And we are your geeky gentlemen, and we will be discussing things.
Ah!